Good morning. Oh, that's on. What an honor to be one of the first Lightning Talks, right? Thanks for coming. App migration has been on the road for a few years, but recently, customers started to migrate with instances size that are total game changers. And since we are a platform, the whole reason of being a platform is to be useful for our consumers and clients. So we're trying to retain that extra complexity that comes with the scale as much as we can on our side, right? I want to do a quick disclaimer. Every time I mention migrations here, I'm specifically talking about DC, data center, to cloud migrations. Could be Forge or Connect, but I'm not talking about the Connect to Forge migrations. Quick agenda, we'll be talking about present, some features, Forge app migrations, content fixing, app migrations preload, multi-transfers, and the future. One thing that I want to bring your attention is that the first time we need to scale up our platform, we aim at being able to process 10 times the load we were having back then, at that point in peak times. We're doing that exercise again, but this time we are aiming at 30 times the peak load because we're anticipating a huge load coming from enterprise customers. All of those features that are listed here, they are somewhat related to that new focus of scale, but especially those two, app migrations preload and multi-transfers. We'll go into details soon. Right, so we started app migrations in 2020. It was a very different world back then, and we had a strict focus on coverage. We want to bring as many apps we could to the platform, cover as many use cases we could, and we succeed on that. So we have right now more than 200 migrating apps on the platform with automated migration path. And by that I mean, the actual migration path. We're not counting those migration flows where our documentation supported that requires intervention from the user. I'm not counting what we call install-only apps, the apps that only need to be in the cloud for the migration to succeed because the data will be carried over as part of the core product. So those are actual apps that have been put effort into making them automated. In September, we launched Forge app migrations. It's still early days, but we have some apps using, some of them in the room even. But we expect that number to increase significantly across the year because more apps are onboarding. We'll be putting more effort on Forge app migrations and features. So yeah, stay tuned. And we're taking this opportunity of extending the platform to do some tweaks on that focus that we put so hard on coverage. Now we want, because of enterprise are coming, we want to put more focus on user experience and reliability. So we take a lot of the lessons learned from Connect, and with this opportunity Forge, we try to bring a bit more focus to that side, that new dimension with enterprise. Connect has been widely used for a long time, so I think it's fair to use as a reference to talk about Forge. So just quickly recap what app migration looks for Connect apps, and then we do the same for Forge. So the Forge app migration platform has some very fundamental building blocks. So it's like eventing. If there are happenings for the migration, we notify the apps. There will be access to ID mappings because when you migrate from server to cloud, IDs can change. And we also allow APIs for apps to talk back to Atlassian to update the needful for migrations, right? That's it, pretty much. It's very simple. And that also means that when there are some apps that require some complex or complicated transformations, often that logic will reside on the partner's pipeline. That would be handled by externally by them, and those migrations can be as fast or slow as those pipelines allow. Events are sent as webhook. Connect standard, right? So same security mechanism, same everything, same payload. REST APIs, again, very similar to what you're used to in Connect. And we delegate the progress and status of migration entirely to the migrating app. We only do timeouts, but they're very forgiving, which leads to the last topic that migrations can take up to 2 weeks. That's an overview of Connect, just a quick recap. But now with Forge, we're changing things a bit. And starting with this definition of export phase, in Connect, everything is very fluid. There's events flowing everywhere, and there are actions flowing everywhere. So export and import are kind of happening at the same time. In Forge, we're breaking down. So we have a clear export part, a clear import part, and that has a good reason for it, because in case there's some problems on the import phase, we don't need to disturb the customer again doing another export on something that was perfectly fine on the first attempt already. So that's for Forge. Similar to Connect, events would be arriving as function invocations on your Forge app. There will be some implicit retries, also something slightly different than Connect, and we'll be subject to Forge runtime limits for CPU memory. But you've been on the keynote, they said there that async functions will be running up to 15 minutes, so we'll take advantage of that as well. In Connect, you can send terabytes of data. Files can be individually as big as a few gigabytes, but that doesn't fly in Forge, because of the constraints. So we're limiting each file to up to 15 megabytes. You can still have as many files as you want, but they need to be more bite size. And that will become the basic unit of work of a Forge migrations. And on those files, you'll be reporting progress individually, and then we'll be calculating or deriving the overall status in function of those. And I talked about the last point already, but the one there in the middle is shorter timeouts. Short timeouts because the files are smaller, and that's good because improves reliability and recoverability, but also improves user experience with a quicker feedback and better observability to the customers. So yeah, lessons learned from Connect we're trying to apply on Forge app migrations. Still, keeping the wins, the things that work for Connect. Broken links, something that wasn't on the original design of the platform. I mentioned ID mapping, something that's a problem that needs to be solved by the apps. But we collaborate with Glyphy and Draw.io, so we could understand those mappings that changed as part of the migration. And we fix the ID, the old IDs with the new ones. So when the migration lands on cloud, it will be ready for it to use already. So just an example of collaboration that can happen. Another feature I'd like to cover is app migrations preload, just for Connect this one. And what it means, preload is sending the data before, right? And when you have big migrations, sometimes the migration requires the cloud to not being used while the migration is performed because they're blocking data, there's some hot data, so there's a downtime. With enterprise customers, that downtime is pushed to the weekend, right? But weekends have a limit, so even if you start on Friday, you have like 50, 60 hours of downtime, and that's it. So preload comes to address that, trying to shift some of that time during weekdays, the part that doesn't block the user, so we can restrict the downtime of the weekend. I'll show some screens that we have for that. If the app implements the preload feature, it will be exposed to the customer as soon as on the app assessment screen, on that box there on the side. And then with that, they can plan better the phase of the migrations, which apps will belong to each phase, and the times they will require. I'm leaving a QR code in case you want to experiment with the feature. And then the second moment where the feature is surfaced to the customer is when they're actually running the migration. At the scoping of the migration, where they would pick the apps, they can pick preloadable app data. And that's the migration they would run, let's say, on Monday, Tuesday. It will be done by Wednesday, Thursday. So on Friday, when they start the big migration, that part will be done already. Multi-transfers is something that I'm really excited to talk about because it addresses one conceptual problem we have with the platform. App migrations can be very big, even bigger than the actual Jira migration or conference migration. And still, the apps only have one transfer to report status and percentage. So that doesn't scale well. We're breaking down with multiple transfers. We just closed the RFC recently, but I'm also leaving the link in case you want to see the discussion, what happened. And there are two good reasons to break down multi-transfers. Let's talk about them. In this fictional app, which is not a very fictional to be honest, it's very close to a real use case we have. Let's say that the app needs to migrate attachments, user data, audit logs. But the instance will be ready to be used at the moment those two entities on the top are in cloud. Audit logs can be imported on the background. So that with that thing, if the app segregates the transfer into logical unities, and some of them can be post-loaded, we are also reducing the downtime of the migration. Right. So that's like a fiction timeline of how it could be implemented. That's just the first aspect, the first positive aspect of breaking down transfers, the monolithic transfers into smaller chunks. But there's also something very interesting in the case some of them fail, right? If all the logs fail in this scenario, the customer doesn't need to migrate the whole thing again, do it export. They can just do a retry on that small part that failed. And of course, the customer will also have, again, better visibility about the progress of their migrations. If you want to adopt, isn't an entirely new world. It's just, if you have those listeners that run on server, we are implementing a new method called getTransferDefinition, which you have a set of them, and they are as simple as having a name of your entity, blocking, not blocking, and even dependencies. Let's say that one transfer depends on the other, and that's it. At the time that my navigation is executing, we'll have a nice dependency tree built, and we know when it's time for you to perform the transfer. You get an invocation of that method from a listener, just like you do today in the Connect framework. But if you are familiar with the API, you notice that there's no transfer ID on the signature. Now we have this transfer info, which inside there will be the transfer ID, but also the dependencies, the name, and other metadata that start to become relevant with multi-transfers. And that's it. So we still report progress the same way you do for on a monolithic transfer, but now with multi-transfers, and things should just work. You might have noticed that there's an overlap between those two features, right? Preload and multi-transfers, and that's correct. But the thing I want to bring your attention to is that preload wouldn't work for data that depends on mappings, because the mappings either won't be there yet, or they could be outdated. So if your data depends on that, don't use preload. You can use multi-transfers to segregate the migrations. You can handle blocking data with multi-transfers just as well. You just need to be explicit about which parts of your transfer are blocking for the users. And if your data doesn't depend on mapping, the data doesn't depend on mappings and that's not blocking, you pretty much can go with either one, right? Both should work. Maybe that's more like a question of user experience then, how you want to design the migration. And that's the slide I thought was coming in the future. So I'm oversimplifying things a lot here, of course. But on the top, we have something that represents the idea of the current migrations platform. There will be migration events. There will be some systems coordinating those events. And then internal services actually executing the actions that are required to fulfill the intention behind those events. And they will be talking to Confluence and Jira. We are moving now to a streaming architecture, where the events are being streamed, and there will be transformer or consumers inside Jira and Confluence, capturing those events and applying in place, much closer to the data, less networking, more idempotency. This is used a lot already for Jira and Confluence core migrations. We are working now in ways to leverage on that for apps as well. So you can have transformations logic as much as possible running as part of migration inside the product for apps. So that's yet another thing that could unleash enterprise customers. All here is very new, very fresh. Even this focus on user experience reliability is something that's not as old as the platform. So it's a good time for all of you to send us feedback, suggestions, questions. This QR code is just a link to my email, but please, if you're also suffering with enterprise migrations and you see the platform could be doing better to support you, please reach out to us. That's all I had. We go to questions now, maybe? Thank you.